Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to host you and to see all of the work here from so many people on display. I'm just thrilled. And in bite-sized chunks too, you know. Yes, the German airlines are on strike, so I don't know. So we've missed a whole load of wonderful German people. But they've, as I say, already achieved net zero. They've never actually made a profit. If you add up all of the airlines' income and losses over all time, you'll notice that Matt Damon picked airlines as a good thing to advertise crypto.com, you know. Although I think it's optimistic to consider that you'd stay at the same value. Anyway, other people have forgotten their passports or that they need passports. We're out of Schengen. It's sorry to miss you if you're out there, but there we go. And just so many contributions from so many different people from different places, different circumstances, and different partners. So that's great. When I was asked to finish and wrap this up, I was asked to sort of, you know, prognosticate a little bit. And so there we go. So a wise man once said, yeah. So I think that's probably a good thing. And actually, a number of the engineers that I've employed, quite difficult to get them to say anything. So they must be very wise. But since I was scheduled to say something, I thought I would, you know, try and look briefly into the future. So, of course, I turned to Bill Gates. You know, not a personal hero. But I think this is a great quote from his original book, The Road Ahead, yes, which had an interesting take on the internet. It had to be rewritten, actually, after only a very small number of months to include the internet into it, which was quite funny. But, of course, actually, only a few days ago, you'll see that he's now moved on, and the age of AI has begun, you know. And so global health and education are the areas, you know, where you can't get employed workers, qualified people, to help with people's health and education. What we're going to do is get AI to reduce inequality in the third world. Well, of course, I take multiple inspirations. You know, Larry Ellison, someone else that's not particularly inspiring to me. But he has a great video. What the hell is cloud computing? Slightly rude, but it's very, very funny. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd recommend it. This is one of the more apposite things he says there. And I think it's extraordinarily true. I don't know. But he also says, look, if orange is the new pink, you know, we're going to do orange in our advertising. And so, you know, let's advertise orange things. So I was thinking, you know, well, who better to ask about the future? Who? You know, who? What better to ask about the future than a generative pre-trained transformer? If you've been sitting under a rock for some years, this is essentially a predict a plausible next word machine, okay? It sounds better when you say ChatGPT, but anyway. And the real question is, you know, are you a stochastic parrot? I've met people like this. They're people who speak without thinking, much like a parrot, who just repeats words and phrases and jumbles them together without understanding really their meaning or how they fit. And these people can be surprisingly effective. They sound deeply informed, you know? They say things that make you think, oh, that's interesting, or is that right? But is it? Oh, wait a minute, I know that's rubbish. You know. Anyway, so there's a nice paper here that had two of its authors fired who wrote it that you can read on the dangers about it. So let's try. And Arno Versini very kindly pointed me to this. So let's ask the technology about this. Oh, there's another paper there about from Stefano Quintarelli, who is an Italian digital person, and he says, the problem with AI is that it's been marketed to us a lot. So let's instead call it systematic approaches to learning algorithms and machine inferences, salami. Because if you call it salami, you start saying things like, you know, is the salami going to take over the world? You know, or is the salami going to kill us? You know, you can perhaps cognitively wrestle with it more you know, easily. Anyway, so I turned to the machine and I said, can you explain how Golang is used in the LibreOffice? You know, because Go is obviously a very trendy, you know, the obsolete language of the future. And, you know, and as yet as far as I'm aware, we haven't used it. And, okay, so we're actually using it for Kubernetes. So thank you, Rash, wherever he is wrestling manfully with it. But it says, well, as far as I know, Go, also known as Golang, is not actually used in the LibreOffice codebase. So this is a relief in some sense. So then I asked her about Rust. Rust is the other. Well, who can prognosticate about the future of Rust? Anyway, and it says, as far as I know, Rust is not used in the LibreOffice codebase, at least not in any significant way. So this also seems pretty good. It's almost as if this came off a web page that someone wrote, right? So far, so sensible. And this is the paid-for version of ChatGPT 4, you'll be pleased to know, recent knowledge. So I thought, well, let's ask it again. Let's explain how Rust is used, not explain how it's used in LibreOffice, but explain how it's used in the LibreOffice codebase in one sentence, just to shorten it down. Well, it turns out Rust is used in the LibreOffice codebase to improve memory, safety, and performance. I'm flattered. The critical components, such as LibreOffice Kit, are using Rust, right? And you read this and you think, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rust is used. So there's this very complicated git grep here that gets rid of trust and frustrum and upper ustra and this sort of thing that happen to have Rust in it. And we have one hit. It's frustrating to be unable to see content in missized cells. So apparently, the fun fact is Rust isn't used in LibreOffice. So I thought, where exactly is it not used? So can you explain in 4 bullet points, where it is used? Well, it is used for critical components, LibreOffice Kit mentioned. It's integrated with C++ code using the Rust foreign function interface, and it's used for implementing parallel algorithms in the experimental multi-threaded formula calculation engine in Cal. And Collabora online as well, it's used to improve. So we're obviously at the cutting edge without even realizing it. And then I went on to say, in more detail, it's used in Uno to implement the UDK API library and create, this interface to create and manage, objects from Rust. SVG import. I think this is probably Federico Mena Quintero did this for GNOME, like he ported librsvg, and some random echo of this has been connected in. It's the implementation that's written for SVG is faster and more memory efficient than the previous implementation in C++. Uno language bindings. The binding for Python, it turns out, is written in Rust. And so it goes on. It's just amazing. In the summary, of course, the use of Rust in LibreOffice is an example of how modern programming languages can be used alongside established code bases to provide new functionality and improve performance. So that's amazing, isn't it? Ship it. And while we're there, we should apply this to global health and education because, really, the people in the third world need a doctor that has this level of insight and deep understanding and can prescribe without... Anyway. So I think when you look at all of this, one of the things that comes out to me is that as programmers, we try and avoid rat holes. It's very easy for us to become obsessed with some detail and go deep on it. And we need to stand up and look at the bigger picture and reassess often. And also, as programmers, our grip on reality is quite precious to us. Like this bug is so weird. What is going on? You have to force yourself to believe in determinism. The CPU actually is logical. And I think, it's quite odd. And I think so. Truthfulness is really, really fundamental, I would say, to what programmers do. And as business people, it's also really important. So when people join Collabora, I give them a very long document, which it has a bit at the bottom that says, if you read this far, tell me. Almost no one tells me. So, but one of the things in the middle says, accuracy is a core value. If you're going to say something, you should be pretty sure that what you say is true. And one way to make it true, if you don't know, is to equivocate. So I think it's 100K. It's very different from it is 100K. And you need to be sure that you're conveying the right information, that it's accurate, so that what we say, and if it ends up in front of a customer, and the customer makes a decision based on it, and we were wrong, or we were uncertain, that's really bad. So we try and get this right. And anyone that's been in a business meeting where a customer has misunderstood something, or got the wrong end of the stick, or is convinced of something that's not true, the amount of work you have to put in to try and persuade them, often over multiple meetings, to try and persuade them that actually they were wrong and that this is right, is phenomenal. It's incredibly expensive. So I think truthfulness is absolutely vital. And of course, a place you most see stochastic parrots is in politics, I would argue, because it's a great way to appear knowledgeable and competent through stringing together words that seem to have the right effect. So my hope is that AI will bring a flight to quality, that as the amount of misinformation and fluff appears out there, that people will care more about truthfulness and quality. Nevertheless, having taken the mickey out of AI a bit, our partners, Nextcloud, maybe you saw, Julius had some great things he can show you, integrating AI quite quickly. And it's, I think, going to be incredibly useful for generating all sorts of things under expert supervision. This is the key here, really, I think, It's all very well saying, give me a contract, a legal contract or something, but probably, you want someone to check that first, probably. And when it comes to an image, of course, well, I'll show you one later. But there's some really nice things, design options. You can see whether the design is better, perhaps. If you're not a designer, perhaps you can. And one of the things I like this is tending to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and to underestimate in the long run. So I'm trying to squash it in the short run, and perhaps we should big it up in the long run, just so we get a more balanced view. So the other side of this, of course, is you may have to surrender all of your data to train and ground and prefigure the UI. And so again, I was particularly encouraged as Microsoft fired their entire AI ethics team to see Nextcloud, sort of publishing principles of ethical AI and having this offline and data in your box. And my hope is that we will eventually get a good on-premise, digitally sovereign solutions for AI. So that was my rabid AI spiel. Let's talk about the web, meanwhile. So the web is also quite a good example of where I want to go, basically, pretty much. So this is the future prognostication of Mark Andreessen in '95. Netscape will soon reduce Windows to a poorly debugged set of device drivers. This provoked Microsoft to get involved in the web vigorously and Bill Gates to rewrite his book. And, well, the funny thing is that Windows possibly is a quite well debugged set of device drivers now. I mean, they've had some time since '95 to get it better. And so we're getting there, aren't we? The world is, in part, moving to the web. And the web API is just amazingly great. I mean, by 2012, we could actually play web audio. You could generate samples and send them to a sound card. It was amazing. Yes. But it, of course, has broken the stranglehold of Windows APIs. And the really encouraging thing, when I look at it, this is a graph of all browsers over time, is that, when I started back in these, things long ago, many of us started somewhat over here on the graph, right? The idea of having free software being extraordinarily, predominant and dominant in, well, actually almost any market was nonsense, right? With a Solaris in the Unix world and so on. And, Linux, of course, went ages ago. But this is a desktop, this is a fat client desktop application. At the end of the day, you can call a browser what you like, but it's a big binary blob you put on your PC, right? And yeah, I mean, all of these now are KHTML derived, right? Then there's Firefox on top, and then, well, there's some others, but I don't know if they even exist in any significant market share anyway. The whole world has gone free software, which is kind of cool. And similarly, devices are changing. If you look at the Windows versus Android graph here, that's pretty encouraging. Of course, desktops are slowing, changing a little bit more slowly. But I want to change this graph. I think this is, this is right for looking like this previous graph. Like, So this is, this is in part the mission. So I want to talk a little about digital sovereignty because I think this is quite a useful way of framing what traditionally old people call free software. So if you've heard Richard's talk, about his jammed Xerox printer and the closing of software, this sort of Genesis story of sin entering the world and software becoming proprietary and all that sort of thing. I think, he did fantastic things here. This free as in freedom, though brings a difficult framing. Free software has some problems with it. But I think the realization that you suddenly don't own your printer that you paid for, and that you have to get someone else or pay again, or that you can't do what you want with it, you're no longer free, is, I think, absolutely vital. And even if you ignore the linguistic things. And then, of course, open source, perhaps a different way of looking at a similar idea, but without this framing of everything should be free of price, which at least in the English-speaking world is a real problem. And avoiding that ambiguity and then perhaps emphasizing a slightly different freedom in terms of the openness of the source. And actually, one of the interview questions, well, I shouldn't tell this online, but we ask, what's the difference between free software and open source? To see if you know anything about open source or free software. And it's quite interesting. Even quite competent people fail the test, but they're perhaps not old like me, I don't know. And then open standards, we'll talk perhaps to Simon Phipps a bit about this tomorrow, and we'll have some kind of a discussion there. But open standards is something totally different. And open here has a totally different meaning. So just so you're aware, open only means it's not a monopoly, it's not a cabal, it's not a a cartel that's distorting the market. It just means anyone can join the standards, the cartel, basically, like MPEG-LA. These things can produce open standards that are actually just anathema to open source. So it's worth knowing it's a totally different meaning of open. But the great thing about the open standards wars that we had was that people could understand they didn't own their own document. So in the same way that I don't own my own printer, which is something that programmers might care about. I mean, most people just want the printer to work. They kick it, and why does inkjet ink cost more than vintage Dom Perignon, whatever per? This is the thing that exercise. But when you come to politicians and people, why I can't own my own documents? What? I wrote all this stuff and I can't read it without paying a tax. So we could explain this to people, and that was great. But I like digital sovereignty because I think ultimately it's the same intuition here. Software is so cool. Why should you keep me out? What is all this locking me out? Why can't I mend and improve and repair my own software? I should. And this is a message that's starting to get legs in institutions and governments who suddenly care about sovereignty, who've suddenly noticed the nation state or the conglomeration of states exist, and that they can be under threat, and that they need to control their own destiny and be able to change things themselves. This is Stable Diffusion trying to do this. The idea of buying a new car with the hood, bonnet welded shut, so you can't actually mend it. You have to go to someone else with a welder and ask them. And one of the things that convinces me that the time has come here is that even our traditional opponents, perhaps, let's say, so the head of MI6 is, of course, lobbying regularly to read all your email and to downgrade your encryption standards and so on. And he says, well, this is digital sovereignty, but perhaps framed negatively. Yeah, if you allow another country to gain access to really critical data about your society, that'll, over time, erode your sovereignty. So another angle looking at it, in terms of that, just control over the data and the software going together, I think gives us this unprecedented opportunity to tell people about this and to effect change. So, thank you for being here. And thank you for being a critical part of this. My take is that the documents tie people currently to Windows. There are relatively few attach points that keep people in Windows. I guess email perhaps is one, but I'm optimistic the Thunderbird Foundation will do cool things about this. But beyond that, and I guess identity is being slowly sucked into the proprietary clouds, of which there are several. But I think documents are really what keep people on Windows and in Microsoft Office, and we are doing a fantastic job at cutting this cord. And my hope is that will result in an amazing market change and drive us all to software freedom through, well, many network effects. Our partners, of course, make that possible and give us a reach to deliver this to people that's just amazing. The attitude that actually this is software and we can change it and we can make it better. And if you can't do it, then get someone else to do it. But you can contribute and improve it. I think it's really the only solution for full digital sovereignty is open source or free software. I think it's politically comprehensible at the moment, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. There will be a Hackfest tomorrow, which I think will be in this room. So we'll put tables in here and power strips and reorder the seats a bit. There'll be some kind of unstructured chat with Simon, and perhaps Robert will do a talk maybe tomorrow that won't be recorded. And then we'll have partner workshops after that. There'll be kind of invite only for partners. But please do stay here. There'll be food and fun things, Hackfest in parallel. I just wanted to say, finally, thank you for joining our mission. We're here to make open source rock, and we can't do that without our partners, our customers, collaborators, and all of you here. So thank you so much.